Okay. So we have, as I say, a PAT programme today. We've got Flora Neville from Citation. Welcome. James Sage from, is it RWK Goodman, James?
Yeah.
It is now. Yeah, okay. I wasn't quite sure. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. Who's going to give us some top tips of employment retention. And then we have Cate, and Tamsin hasn't joined us yet, Cate, so hopefully she'll be with us soon. And we've also have Alethea from, who's part of Care and Support West as well. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to introduce Flora to start with. Flora, are you ready? Are you ready to go? Yep. Okay, we can see your screen's coming up now. So I'm going to stop talking and hand you over to Flora. Thank you very much, Flora.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks for inviting us to join you today. We're going to talk through a few different bits and pieces this morning. Top tips to boosting employee well-being, talking about handling grievances, disciplinaries and absence, which are always tricky, but unfortunately we deal with human beings, so they're always on the table somewhere. So it's looking at those, and we do have time for a little bit questions. And if you've got questions on the back of today as well, then I'm sure Karen can follow with those on to us as well, so not a problem, we can pick them up. I'm joined this morning, sorry, I can't introduce me, my name's Flora Neville, and I'm going to take you through the bulk of the slides. Rosie's also joined us this morning, so I'm just going to let Rosie just do the about us slide about who Citation are. Thanks, Rosie.
Thanks, Flora. So hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Rosie from Citation, and I'm the Partnerships Manager for the care sector. So work very closely with Care and Support West and a number of other partners in the sector. So who are Citation? Just for a little bit of context for those who don't know us before Flora goes through her slides. So we support lots of care providers and lots of other sectors, but many care providers with health and safety services, employment law services, and many other additional services such as care policies and procedures, mock inspections, all sorts of things to help and keep you compliant. We have many clients, and many of those are in the care sector, and we support you by hand-holding you, just making sure you've got everything in order. We provide you with documentation. We come to your homes, to your sites, to make sure everything's in order, and just to support you and guide you through. It's very difficult to keep on top of everything, especially with ever-changing world that we're living in today. So we can be on hand to help you manage everything. One of the key areas of our service is our 24/7 advice line. So whenever there's an issue, big or small, during the day, during the night, whatever it might be, we are on hand to support you and guide you through and help you. We've been trading for many years, so fortunately have many years of trading under our belt. So we have many clients that we support, and we hope we can support you too in the future. Thanks, Flora.
Thanks, Rosie. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so what are the kind of top HR issues that come out time again affecting the care sector? Disciplinary, 23%, vaccination 14%, and sickness absence 14% as well. Sickness always was a bit higher, but obviously vaccinations come into that as well. Probation is 8%, resignation 7%, and grievance 5%. So, and those don't, obviously vaccination slightly different, but you know, they don't change. Disciplinary is always a challenge, and absence is always a challenge in a business, no matter which type of sector, but particularly, unfortunately, in your sector, they always come up time and time again. Engagement and retention is key, and I know obviously James is going to talk to you about retention and all the rest of it as well, but it is really, you know, it's got to be such a focus to keep the good people in the business. You've worked hard to get good people in your business, so it's important obviously to keep them. Engaging people is the key thing, because recruiting, as we know, is really challenging. It's also really costly, so it's avoiding that as much as you possibly can, and keeping the good people in the business that you've put the investment into already. It's engaging people in the business. You know, make sure that they feel motivated, they feel valued in your business. Everybody needs to feel a sense of purpose, and it's making sure that they, you know, they have job satisfaction. They feel like they are part of something that they're making a difference to as well, is the key thing. Using people's talents and skills is key, making sure you know what people's talents and skills are, but using them as well, so they feel like they're not just doing a job that anybody could do. They really are bringing something to your organisation and contributing into the success of the business and the working of the business as well. So, and you're obviously, your biggest asset in your business is your team, so you need to put that effort and time and all the rest of it into the team and ensure that they are engaged. It is about creating that positive working environment. It's so key, and that's where everybody wants to work, and is in that positive working environment. So creating it and maintaining it is the absolute key thing, and that's where employee wellbeing comes in. Obviously, wellbeing's always been, you know, sort of focus, but it's a particular focus now, because everybody's been under, particularly and obviously in your sector, under intense pressure, and you know, it's been a real struggle throughout the pandemic, and you know, ongoing as well. It's a huge thing, and 50% of all work-related illness, ill health cases are due to stress, anxiety or depression. That's huge. The average length of absence as a result of stress, depression or anxiety is 29 days. And the cost to employers is £3.7 billion. So, you know, and you know, I don't need to tell you how stressful it is when you've got people off ill, and it's the pressure it puts in the business, but also that you know, that individual is not in a great place, and you want to try and help and support as much as you can. And that's why having a real focus right now on wellbeing is absolutely key. And engagement and wellbeing go hand in hand. They absolutely do. And you need to make sure that wellbeing is on your agenda. Now, depends what your system is at the moment or what you've got in place. Look at, you know, do you have a wellbeing policy? What wellbeing tools do you currently have in place as well? Because it is important to have wellbeing tools in place, and wellbeing tools in place as well that work in your organisation. Again, it's all well and good saying, well, yeah, we've got this and we've got this policy and this and all the rest of it, but you need to have things that actually work in your organisation. And the way to do that is by engaging with your team to find out whether they work. Yeah, look at whether they're used, whether they could be better, and ask your team, you know, ask them what would they like to see, what would, you know, and always a good exercise to do, start, stop, continue. What should we continue that's really good? What should we stop doing that's not good? And what could we start doing that might make things better? So it's always a really good exercise to give you some discussion with your teams. And again, goes hand in hand with engagement. So we're not going to go through every single one of these, but what I would say about your wellbeing tools as well is they don't need to be expensive, they don't need to be complicated. They can be really simple, but the key thing is they're in place, they work, and they're being monitored, and you're being proactive with them as well. Wellbeing management isn't just there when somebody is at crisis point. It's about keeping people well, and avoiding, hopefully getting to that crisis point, and that's the real key thing. So, you know, having things like wellbeing specific meetings and check-ins. How often do you actually have these? Do you ever have these? Do you look at it? Do you have an actual discussion with people about their wellbeing? When they're well, not just when they're unwell, because that can be the challenge in time when people don't know, you know, what's wrong or how to cope, or they feel overwhelmed or whatever else. Stress risk assessments, I'm going to talk about them in a wee bit more detail in a second. Encourage people to take physical activity. Now, your job's very, very, very physical, but a different type of physical activity, maybe, you know, taking themselves off to do something else or whatever else. Starting a buddy system, a mentoring system, again, really effective, and can work very, very well. And it's about somebody else having some other kind of support in the organisation, not just from the line manager or from you directly, because again, you've got everybody's support, and that won't always be, you know, the most effective way. So it's looking at other ways that can happen, and somebody else has that other support within the organisation. Make sure everyone is taking regular breaks. Seems like an obvious thing, and again, not always the easiest thing to do, but all these little things do make a difference. COVID-related communications and reassurance, again, just it's about giving people the right information that so that everybody knows, okay, this is what's happening, this is what we're working on, this is the impact, all the rest of it. So it's about communication, and it's always key throughout all of HR and employment law, but particularly when we're talking about well-being and things like that as well, because people can become anxious if they feel like they don't know or they don't have a clear understanding of something. Training, always really important. And that's whether it's training your team or having people trained to be people to do jobs like mental health first aiders, that kind of thing as well. So it's kind of twofold there. Always comes into it. Work together through difficult decisions. That again, with a buddy and mentoring system, can work very, very well. If somebody is having some challenges or they're struggling with something, then it can help them. Make sure you do have an open door culture, and make sure you don't just talk about having an open door culture. Make sure that actually is the case. People are available, people are accessible, there are channels to communicate with management and everybody else. So, and make sure you do keep everybody informed. Back to that communication piece as well there, and provide an employee assistance program. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a second or two. Okay, so individual risk assessments are something, and generally stress risk assessments are something. I don't know if it's something you do at the moment. It might be something you've not even heard of, but they're certainly worth thinking about. It's about focusing. Now, there's different kind of stress risk assessments and things you can do. It's not just about when somebody's at crisis point as well. It's about, again, avoiding getting into that situation. So it's about doing that when somebody feels, when somebody's well and doing it in a business. And again, it can be used, individual ones can be used at stress point, because it is a focus on the person and you're working directly with them. Yeah. And you would also have like a company-wide stress risk assessment as well. And that's looking at all the areas. There's categories in various categories within your organization. The issue with stress is it's cumulative, as we know. It's not tends to be just one thing. There tends to be, a variety of things, and then something might just be the icing on the cake. But it's looking at all of those and looking at how you can reduce certain things within those categories. Now, you're never going to be able to eliminate stress for everybody and just remove it. That unfortunately is impossible. It'd be nice, but it's impossible. So it's removing or changing the things you can change within your organization. So look at the different categories, somebody's role, the relationships, the environment, where are the stress factors, but you need to engage with the team to find out what those are. So again, it's make it back to that whole engagement, make sure you have a clear understanding of, because again, everybody's stress is very different. So what might be stress to one person is just a little bit of pressure to the other person, and that works very well for them. But then pressure can become overwhelming, and that's when it becomes too much. So again, it's getting the gauge on that, and it is difficult. I think as humans and as managers and business managers, we always want to fix things, but it's important to let the employees tell you what would work for them rather than you just thinking about what you think would work for them, and then solutions can be tailored to individuals as well. Explain as well to people that it's an assessment, it's not a test. It's about how they feel, it's about how things impact them, and it's also about how you can help them as well, or the business can help them, or their colleagues, or whoever else. So, and generally we would, from the point of view of an individual stress risk assessment, we generally ask an individual to go and fill that in themselves. But if someone is really struggling, it's a good thing to offer to work through it with them. And then remember as well, when you're agreeing any actions, it's got to work for the employee, but it's also got to work for you as an employer and the business as well. So there's there on the right hand side, there's a kind of example of an idea. And again, something we always get, when you're talking to people like this, they always say, oh, I know what my issues are, I know how to deal with them, so I don't need to do this. But given some of these questions can be something maybe they hadn't thought about and being a factor in their stress. So it's good to encourage it, just talking through. And this is just examples. You can change it and modify it to what your needs are, but they are a really good tool in the business. Another tool in the business is what we call RAP. which is Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And this is very much about helping individuals to stay mentally healthy. It can be really powerful as it helps others to recognise when maybe somebody is under stress or not in a great place mental health wise, and they might not even recognise that themselves. So it's kind of doing it in advance, and hopefully never being in advance of a crisis situation, but it's about having pre-agreed actions or language or whatever that people can use when somebody is maybe struggling, and it's good to help. It's a good thing as well to help understand what keeps us well, and if you think somebody is struggling, then it's also good when you think somebody is challenged or struggling or whatever else, you can maybe refer back to that as well. So ask questions such as things like, what helps you stay mentally healthy at work? What can we do to proactively support you to stay mentally healthy at work? What are your stress triggers as an individual? Are there maybe any early warning signs that we might notice when you're starting to experience poor mental health? Somebody might become angry or withdrawn or whatever else. If we notice early warning signs, what should we do? What support can we put in place to minimise triggers or help you manage the impact? And what steps can you take to take if you start to experience poor mental health at work? So you can see how all of having just entering into that discussion alone is really beneficial, but having that information as well so that you can be proactive and you're not just standing on the sidelines watching somebody struggling, not knowing how to help. Stress bucket again is another good tool to do, and again there's lots of tools out there. I'm just giving you a few examples here of things that we have seen success with and I've used myself in my business as well. And the thing with a stress bucket is we know and we recognise that there's everyday stresses, which is work, money, family, whatever else it might. And these things all flow in and out of a stress bucket like rain. And then we have ways of coping that allows that stress to flow out like holes in the bucket. The idea behind this is about writing everything down. And because people don't always realise what's going on, what the stress is, where it's coming from. People become overwhelmed and they just don't know where to start, and they don't know what's going on, and they can't tell you what's wrong with them because they don't actually know. And we've all been in that situation at some point, and that's where this can work very well. And it's about when the stress bucket becomes too full, then you need to look at, okay, what changes can I make here? So it's about looking at what can I change, what can I influence, and what can't I change and I need to accept. Because things that you can't change and you need to accept, there's no point in focusing on those. It's then about focusing on what can I change, what can we have an impact on here. So it can work really, really well. So just another example, I just want to give you a couple of examples. The other one I mentioned there was the employee assistance program. And I don't know whether you have one in place currently or not, but if you do, you'll certainly use it. I'm sure it's a fantastic tool. Basically, so you have that's external support for your team. So somebody comes to you, for example, and says, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I've got an alcohol problem, I've got a drug problem, I've got a debt issue, whatever it might be. You're probably not qualified to deal with that. So you then have this in place that you can refer them into, where they will get qualified expertise, help, counselling, therapists, information, whatever is required, they will get and is available to them. And it's a real win-win, obviously, because it helps them as an employee and hopefully doesn't get them to the point where they're in crisis point and have to go off absent. Or it is also about you being able to manage and help your team member as well, with getting, increasing or getting their well-being back, and again, hopefully avoiding the absence situation. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to talk about is handling employee misconduct in the workplace, which again, unfortunately, we're dealing with human beings. It is going to happen. Top issue we support care businesses with is handling employee misconduct, both general and gross misconduct, because it does unfortunately happen, as I'm sure you are aware of. Over 50% of the advice sought related to breach of company rules, 27% related to absence without leave, 7% related to abusive behaviour, and it is looking at okay, how do I deal with disciplinary issues then, and what process should you follow? You need to have a process as the first thing. So, and I'm sure you probably will have a process in place. Make sure that you follow that process, because if this doesn't go well and you end up in as a result of it, you end up maybe in a tribunal situation or something like that. If you as the employer haven't followed the process, you will lose. Yeah, so please remember, tribunals or anything like that are set up to protect the employee, not you, the employer. Yeah, so you need to make sure that what you're doing is right. There is an expectation of you as an employer that you do it right. So firstly, have the process there, make sure everybody's clear on the process, and then make sure you follow that process. You know, and go through that at each individual stage correctly, taking notes. You make sure your investigation is thorough, you know, and it's an investigation. You're not making decisions at that point. You're exploring evidence. Make sure you're taking notes, and then, you know, once you're on to the hearing, make sure you do it properly. There's a formal invitation. You look at each individual allegation, and also that you are closing that meeting without issuing any sanction, because the idea behind the hearing is that you are getting all the facts and looking at all sides of the story. Then obviously you've got your sanctions, and lastly then appeal. So again, just make sure you are doing it correctly. Now, gross misconduct is one that, you know, always comes up time and time again. What is it? And we also, you know, looking at what is gross misconduct, what's not, and it's behaviour by an employee which is so bad that the employer can't be expected to employ the employee any longer. It must be a fundamental breach, which goes to the heart of the contract. So you need to make sure your handbook contains obligations. Make sure staff are clear about the terms and conditions of employment, and, you know, they're absolutely clear about what's okay and what's not okay. Make sure the rules are regularly referred to. So example, your team meetings, catch-ups, all the rest of it. Again, reminders for people that what's okay, because people become complacent. One person does something, and that's where non-compliance comes into it as well. Don't tolerate non-compliance, because if you do, then again it becomes difficult. Yeah. There's, again, you know, top gross misconduct issues in care are breaches of safeguarding, breaches of company rules, and bullying, and they do come up time and time again, unfortunately. We always get asked this question: is suspension appropriate? And the first step in the gross misconduct process is considering whether suspension on full pay is appropriate or not, and, you know, that is your first thought process. It might not be appropriate to allow the employee to continue to work whilst you undertake an investigation, and you, again, you know, safeguarding is involved there. What is their stance on suspension? And you may well need to refer to CQC in certain circumstances, but again, you've got to look at what you do, what you've got in place, because if somebody can, you know, somebody accuses you of dealing with something unreasonably or inappropriate or whatever else, then they can claim that the terms of trust and confidence have been breached, which in turn can lead to constructive dismissal. So you do need to be very, very, you know, consider. You do need to really think about it and what you're putting in there. Variety of different considerations. The key thing is make sure, again, you're doing it right. Suspension needs to be confirmed in writing. You keep regular contact with somebody. You don't suspend somebody for longer than is necessary. And again, you're always looking at what you've got in your contract, but you need to have the right things in the contract in the first place is the key thing. Key thing about disciplinary is just follow it correctly. You know, make sure that you've got the right things in there is the important thing, and follow the process to the T, and document it as well, because that's your evidence should you ever require it. Don't forget about that. Okay, last thing I'm just going to cover very quickly is absence. Make sure that you are managing absence. Now, whether your absence is short term, long term, you know, it doesn't matter. One of the key tools though is return to work meetings. I know sometimes they are the thing that gets left or doesn't get done because it's like, oh, we'll do it later or whatever. Return to work meetings are really important after every instance of absence. Doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 1 month, you must do them for a number of reasons, but you have a responsibility under health and safety to do a return to work meeting, because you've got a responsibility to make sure that everybody is at work, is fit to be there. Just because somebody has turned up to work doesn't necessarily mean they're fit to be there. Yeah. So, and it's one of these things that further down the line you may need to refer back to the return to work interview. Make sure you are completing them together and you both sign to say, yep, that's completed. And, you know, asking, are there any other amendments we need to make in the business? Is there any long-term impacts? Do we need to you know about any medication, any treatment? Because again, administering drugs, using equipment, all these kind of things do come into it. Okay. So I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. What I would always say is, remember, the duty is on you. Now, whether that is on, whether we're talking about, because again, you know, there's lots of things about equality and, you know, whether it's absence and disability, all these factors, because you're dealing with human beings, they're never straightforward. They're always quite complicated, and you know that's what we get as questions all the time from our clients. We've got this situation, we've got that scenario, and that's where we can come in and we can help you if you need that. We are specialists in the care sector, as Rosie said, and we deal with hundreds and thousands of care clients across the UK. So if you do want to talk to us to have a better understanding about what we can do and how we can help you in your individual businesses, by all means give us a shout. That's the phone number and the email address there, and I'm sure Karen can forward that on as well if there's anything further. And if you've got any questions, let us know as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Flora. There is one question actually on the chat. Grant has asked about the Employer Support Programme. A bit later on in our presentation, we're going to hear about the Healthier Together. But what Grant is saying, he found his employers didn't use it or didn't find it useful. And has anybody else found the same?
It's amazing. And obviously I don't know the terms of Grant's individual situation there or whatever else, but I don't know again how you maybe introduced it into the business as well, but maybe using we work very closely, ours is through BUPA, and we engage with BUPA to introduce the service in, so that people, I think sometimes as well, you say employee assistance programme, people don't always know what that means. So maybe, you know, ensuring that they know what's available to them and all the rest of it. And again, being a bit more proactive about it sometimes is helpful, rather than just saying, okay, here's a benefit to you. People don't always use their benefits. It's like everything, isn't it? You don't always use what's available to you. But certainly, again, Grant, something we can talk to you about maybe how ours is a little bit different or something like that as well. By all means, pick up with us on it, no problem.
Does that help, Grant? Do you want to have a conversation now or later maybe? Okay, he says thank you. All right. Okay. If there's no further questions, I took quite a lot away from that, and it's a good reminder. I think it's fair to say we think we know about procedures. But it's always good to have that reminder and disciplinary procedures, to follow them to the letter, because otherwise it can be quite difficult and it can come back and bite you on the bum. I'm amazed at the number of cases, 6,672. Is that in a year? That's a big number of cases. So it's always really good to have that reminder. So thank you, Flora, for your presentation. Really appreciate it. If there's no further questions, I'm going to move swiftly on to James. Are you ready, James? Yeah.
I am, yeah. Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Hi. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to focus on some kind of top tips around staff retention. We've been working with lots of care providers and with their HR, with the larger clients, with the kind of HR directors on how they can try and focus on staff retention. I think everyone knows that recruitment and retention is the big issue in social care at the moment, and one of the most challenging things that providers are having to deal with. Recruitment is expensive, difficult, unpredictable, doesn't always go well. And so there is a real incentive to focus your time and effort on improving staff retention, because if you can reduce the number of staff that are leaving, then you're going to obviously have to do less recruitment. And just a kind of snapshot of what the sector is looking like at the moment. There's 165,000 vacancies in the sector. In the 2021 stats show that turnover rate, so this is the number of people leaving their role each year, is 28.5% across the sector, but actually for frontline care worker roles is 34.4%. So almost 35% of care workers are leaving their role every 12 months, which highlights the kind of significant challenges that poses for you. 63% of those people leaving their roles remain in the sector, so they're just moving to a different provider, but 37%, which equates to 152,000 people, are leaving the sector altogether each year. So it's a real problem, and if you're having these problems, you are not alone. Every provider is having these problems at the moment, and the kind of implications of poor retention rates. So firstly, around care quality, so the risk that you're losing those staff relationships with your clients and residents or service users. There's the kind of financial implications of having to keep recruiting and replacing those staff and onboarding them, potentially filling gaps with agencies in between. And there's the operational challenges of that as well. So the management time and resource of recruiting, inducting and onboarding, and also trying to manage agency arrangements to fill those gaps as well. So I think the key, and what should be right at the top of the list for any care manager, director at the moment, is how you're going to, what your retention strategy is going to be, and how you become an employer of choice, because competition in the market is very tight. So you need to be thinking about how you're going to stand out from the crowd, as well as just having a good offering to your existing and prospective workforce. So there's a couple of things I wanted to focus on. The first one is around the work that staff are doing. So we all know that to retain staff, they need to be given meaningful work. Now, you have you're in a good position here, because providing care services is meaningful work and rewarding work. But it's important that the work that staff are doing is also at the top of their skill and experience level, so that they're kind of continuing to develop their own skills and continue to find the job interesting, challenging and rewarding. It's also necessary increasingly since the pandemic to ensure that staff are working reasonable hours and trying to offer flexibility where you can. And I know there have traditionally been challenges around shift patterns and rotas, but I think the more flexibility you can have, the more likely you're going to be able to hold on to staff. And I know that other providers are looking at how they can do that. Learning and development opportunities and career growth opportunities are also really important. Typically, or kind of historically, this has been thought of in the context of vertical progression within an organization, so how you can kind of go upwards. But I think that ultimately those opportunities are going to be limited, particularly in smaller services. So it's really important to be thinking about the kind of horizontal opportunities. So are there different areas of expertise or knowledge that people could be acquiring, or different projects or other areas that they could be leading on to give them those additional kind of development opportunities? Pay is obviously also an important factor, and it's really difficult in the care sector because obviously local authority funding plays a big part in what you can pay staff. and that those fee increases, if there have been them, don't reflect the increasing staff costs. So you're kind of one hand behind your back here, but I think that we have, since the real pressure on staffing, seen providers looking to increase pay, particularly in the charity sector, with a number moving to the real living wage, which is some way higher than the kind of national living wage. So appreciating that there are going to be limits on what you can do, but I think that it's if there is scope to increase pay, then that's something that is probably going to become more necessary, particularly when looking at the pay rates that other sectors are offering your potential or your existing workforce. So the next thing is around culture. Culture is absolutely fundamental, probably the most fundamental thing to staff retention, because unless you can create an environment where staff are happy, feel valued and want to work, it's going to be very difficult to hold on to them, either because they want to go to a different provider or because they want to leave the sector entirely. So the starting point is to make sure that you've got a clearly articulated vision and values which are implemented in practice, and that's the important bit. It's no good just having them written down somewhere. They need to be embedded in the organisation. And these vision and values will set out what's important to you and your teams and provide a common purpose beyond their day-to-day tasks. So it's trying to kind of bring everyone together with a kind of aligned and consistent purpose, so they feel part of a culture and an organisation. It's essential that you have a high performance workplace culture. Staff needs to be performing highly, and they need to be coached and trained to do that. So there needs to be some investment from the providers and managers to upskill and bring staff up to the standard that's required. If that's not done, and we see lots of situations where performance isn't managed effectively enough, often because managers and leaders in care businesses are so busy that it kind of falls by the wayside. But the effect of that is that it creates a drain on your high performing staff. So the people that are performing well tend to pick up slack from those who aren't. And it becomes quite disincentivizing for those high performing staff to be working with staff who aren't performing and nothing is being done about it. So really important that you set high standards and make sure that staff are achieving those. It's also really important from a retention perspective that you have an ethos of caring for and valuing your people. And obviously there's lots of different ways that you can do that. And well-being is as we've heard, is an important aspect of that. And I'll say a bit more on that in a minute. Effective communication and engagement is also critical. So the employers that we've seen that have kind of fared the best during the pandemic have been those that put a lot of emphasis on communication and engagement with their staff. And this really is about a kind of a two-way process. So it's providing a forum for you to give information to staff, so being open and transparent about the decisions you're making and what you're doing as an organisation, but also giving staff a voice so that they have the opportunity to share their views and ideas and know that they'll be considered as part of the decision-making processes. And I have to say, giving staff the opportunity to be involved in decision-making is hugely beneficial from the perspective of making them feel valued and empowered and part of an organisation where they have a voice. It really is important. So if there are big decisions being made, seek input from your workforce to get their views. It doesn't mean that all of their views have to be or form part of the final decision, but take them into account and consider them. As part of that kind of communication piece, it's also really important to be sharing the successes, appreciation and recognition. And these can be small gestures. Just a thank you is often enough, but make sure that you're doing that. Effective leadership is also fundamental to your culture. So you need to be thinking as an organisation about whether you sufficiently support, develop and train your leaders, and how you ensure that they are kind of living by the value, the kind of vision and values that that you are adopting. Just bear with me a second.
I think we're having problems with James, or James is having problems with his.
Sorry, that's sorry. I just had something just kind of seemed to crash slightly.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, so that's the culture kind of considerations. The next thing is around making sure that you have a real focus on staff well-being, and obviously we've heard a bit about that already. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of points. We know it's been a really difficult couple of years. There were challenges around well-being in the sector pre-pandemic, but now we're probably at crisis point. There are obviously many aspects to well-being. Could be physical, mental is a significant one, but increasingly financial well-being. So what you can do to support staff, in a cost of living crisis, for example, and also social and emotional well-being as well. So you need to have a well-being strategy, which is identifying what your biggest risks are and how you're going to address those. But the two that I just wanted to very briefly kind of focus on were firstly around mental health, because we know that this in society generally, in the workplace generally, this is a massive problem. A recent report came out last week saying that currently we've got the highest amount of long-term sickness absence in the country that we've ever had. But in the care sector, there's been some quite worrying reports over the last couple of years about the kind of the well-being of the care workforce. And an example is a University College London report, which came out after the first wave of the pandemic, and that found that 58% of the people interviewed, so the care workforce, met the threshold for a mental health disorder. 22% had PTSD, 47% had clinically significant anxiety, and 47% had depression. So that won't necessarily be reflective of each of your organizations, but I think it does just kind of highlight the extent of the challenge that you're facing. You've got people who are doing really demanding jobs, potentially with quite poor health in some circumstances. So how are you going to identify what those issues are and for each individual, and how you're going to support, address and support them to continue working so you don't unnecessarily lose staff. The other one, of which there's been quite a lot in the press recently, and I think the kind of campaign to kind of increase awareness of this has really been quite successful, is around the menopause. We know that the care sector is particularly at risk here, because based on Skills for Care data, which says that 82% of the care workforce are female, and the average age is 44, and 27% are aged 55 and above. So that demographic suggests that menopause is going to be a big issue amongst your workforce, whether you kind of openly know about it or not from staff. And evidence shows that as 25% of women thinking about leaving their job because of struggles with the menopause, 10% do leave their jobs, and 90% say that their employers offer no support with the menopause. So I think this is quite a high risk area, and it's possible that there are unnecessary losses, staff losses because of it. So it's important to make sure that there's good awareness in your organization's strategy for preventing those losses, but also importantly, a policy for staff which they're made aware of. One of the most common problems is that staff start, a woman starts feeling unwell, but doesn't know the actual cause of that, and doesn't, often GPs are bad at diagnosing the health issues are related to the menopause. So the more awareness that you can create internally, the better and sooner they can get signposted to the right support. Something else that we see is a really critical factor for staff retention is HR management. So we offer an advice service which hundreds of care providers use for HR and employment law advice, and what we see is that the way that that providers manage their staff and their internal processes, so their HR processes, is really a key factor from an engagement and retention perspective. So it's really important that you're kind of open, fair, and consistent, and most importantly, proactive in the way that you deal with HR issues, because that builds trust in you as an employer and as an organisation, which is key to retention. Some of the biggest problems or disputes that we see often arise from these HR issues being managed poorly. So if they had been dealt with more promptly or in a better way, possibly those more difficult situations could have been avoided. And some of the examples that are worth just thinking about, which specifically relate to the kind of retention issue. The first one is around sickness absence management. So it's absolutely fundamental that when you're dealing with sickness absence, that you're proactive and you don't wait for it to become a problem. We often see managers and providers putting off dealing or instigating a kind of formal or some sort of process with the employee, mostly because they're trying to be sympathetic to the employee, but actually it's not helpful to the employee to do nothing while they're signed off sick for a prolonged period of time. And the sooner you can start a supportive process, the better for them and for you. Avoiding delays is also critical. There is really clear evidence that the longer someone is off sick, the less likely they will return, and so the greater risk you have of losing them as a member of staff. And we're talking, these could be some of your potentially some of your high performing employees. So the key is to get medical evidence as early as you can. So after a 4-week absence, generally, that's the point that you'd be thinking of getting medical evidence. We see lots of providers and managers waiting far too long to get that first step, because ultimately you can't really do much in your process until you've got the medical evidence, because your process needs to be guided by the medical evidence. And once you've got that evidence, you'll have some advice on what reasonable adjustments they might need, what the triggers potentially are for their issues, and you can then start putting the support in process, which has been guided by the medical evidence, and hopefully that will get them back to work as soon as possible and mitigate the risk of future absences and mitigate the risk of them leaving your employment. The other area is around performance management. I think that we often see managers feeling that this is a kind of daunting process, something that they might kind of get bogged down with. They're very busy, and often it can be something that isn't part of the day-to-day. And performance management, and I think also there's a perception that performance management is a formal process that's about managing someone out of the business when they're not performing. But what it needs to be is a informal, proactive and positive process that starts from the beginning of employment. So it's about informal coaching, regular and kind of brief one-to-one catch-ups to make people clear about what standard is expected and what they need to reach that standard. Hopefully, if you can do that, you will minimize the risk of people continuing not performing to the required standard and ultimately having to part ways because they're not meeting the standard that you require. So that kind of investment of time up front will kind of pay dividends and minimize the risk of losing staff. Other kind of common areas are around grievances and whistleblowing complaints. How you deal with those in a fair and transparent way, again, has a significant impact on trust and culture and how you are perceived by employees. Kind of final point before I give you just an overview of some of the top tips is around retention of overseas workers. So we've seen a really significant increase in the number of providers getting sponsorship license and recruiting from overseas. But there are some kind of unique things to consider from a retention perspective when you're recruiting overseas workers. And often that's not about the job itself, it's about the support measures that are that you're providing kind of outside of the role, the kind of pastoral support, I suppose. So that could include, for example, what are you doing when they arrive in the country? Are you collecting them from the airport? Are you providing support with accommodation? Are you giving them a guide on how to live in the UK or to the local area? What's the cheapest supermarket? How do they register to get a bank account and those sorts of things? So making what can be quite difficult steps of integrating and moving into a new country more straightforward and simple, giving them a buddy at work, regularly checking in, those sorts of things. Because after you've gone to that effort of recruiting from overseas, you want to ensure that you're minimizing the risk of those workers then most likely, rather than going home, probably moving to another provider, because they could do that under their sponsor license. So you've got to try and find a way to make sure that they've got the support they need. So really quickly, just some top tips. First one is making sure, firstly, that you're recruiting the right people with the right values, because if you do that, they're going to be more likely to stay in the first place. Test whether your vision and values are understood and implemented in practice. Leadership is really critical. So make sure you've got the right people with the right skills in the right roles within your organization. Focus on well-being. Develop your people manager skills. So making sure that your managers have got the necessary skills to manage the teams that they are managing. Often managers haven't been given that kind of investment in the people management side. They're excellent in care, excellent in all the vast array of responsibilities they have, but often haven't been given training on how to do the kind of people management side of the role, which obviously is absolutely fundamental from a retention perspective. And any investment in training in that in that area will pay back many times over. Make sure you develop a retention strategy and put it in writing, because if it's not likely to happen, and make sure you're assigning responsibility for those different elements to the relevant people. Possibly have a linked or separate strategy for your overseas workers and how you're going to retain them. Make sure that you collate data on, well, primarily from staff surveys while people are employed, or possibly also from exit interviews, so that you can identify what the potential risk factors are from a retention perspective and what steps you can take to put those right. We can kind of help you with these sorts of issues. We can help you with your kind of retention strategies. As I've said, we provide kind of HR and employment law support. We also do a lot of people manager training for managers. That's something that we're being asked to do a lot at the moment for providers. So if you need any support with those things, we can help. We're also, if you're sat here thinking that retention is something that you want to kind of develop your understanding of, or get some good insights of further, we're running an event on the 29th of September. It's a webinar, 10 o'clock on 29th of September. And it's a panel discussion with me and 3 HR directors of kind of medium to large sized care providers. And they're going to be giving some really practical insights as to what they've done within their organizations to boost staff retention. So hopefully there'll be some really good kind of practical insights to help you, so rather than kind of reinventing the wheel as well. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Wow, I've written down loads of notes here, so I hope everybody else is going to take away quite a bit from that. Menopause, that's an interesting one, isn't it? 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have even considered it, but it's one of those sort of go-to sort of words now. James, I'm interested, medical evidence. Do employers have a right to ask for medical evidence? Is it a given that they can?
Yes, you can ask for it in order to get a medical report. And by medical evidence or report, I'm talking really about occupational health. You can go to a GP, but it doesn't tend to be as useful as going to an occupational health specialist. So you can, yes, you have the right to ask, but you do need to get a report. You do need, under the GDPR, you need consent from an employee, which has to be obtained at the time. You can't get that in advance in the employment contract. So as long as they've given consent, then yes, you can.
Okay, I guess the problem would be if the employer said, no, you're not going to contact my GP, then you've got...
And that does sometimes happen. And it's really about trying to kind of persuade the employee that it's actually in their interest to get some of them see it as a kind of a negative to be getting a report, but actually it's in their interest, because what it means is the employer can understand what their health issues are. They can understand what adjustments are needed, and they can understand how to support them. So it's actually, you know, in their benefit to do that. And if they don't agree to it, then the employer has to make decisions without any medical evidence, which isn't going to be in their interest at all.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? There's nothing on the chat at the moment. I'm sure if you do have questions, James at a later date will be able to help you with them. Wellbeing obviously came as one of the buzzwords as well, that from both James and from Flora. And our next speakers are going to talk about wellbeing. And so we have Tamsin's joined us now, so welcome, Tamsin. So Cate, I'm not quite sure which order you're going to be. Is going to be a joint process, or I'll leave it to you.
I'm going to speak first, and then I'm going to hand over.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. Oh, can you see me?
No, not at the moment. Can hear you. Yeah, we can see you now. Well done, Cate. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you for those two previous speakers. Rosie, I loved your expression, engagement and wellbeing go hand in hand. That was really lovely. And James, you talked a lot about how important it was to thank staff. And I think that's a really important point. Thank you for that as well. My name is Cate Abbey. I'm a wellbeing screening nurse, and I work for the Healthier Together support network. And my role in the Healthier Together support network is to undertake workplace health checks. So that's for health and care staff in the community. So I'm going to do a very short presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my project. I'm going to show you a short video, and then I'm going to answer any questions. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So we work with health and care staff in the community in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. So who do I meet? I meet anybody who's working in health and care. So I might go to a nursing home or a care home. It could be that your staff are working out in people's homes. So I might meet your staff in your office. And I see everyone. So that would be people working in the laundry, people working in the kitchen, drivers, gardeners, maintenance people, nurses, support workers, anyone at all who's involved in health and care. And what is a workplace health check? So it's a 30-minute appointment. I see you in a quiet room. It's not something that we can do online, so I do meet people face to face, and it's just an opportunity really for staff to check in. We consider physical health risks, we look at lifestyle health risks, and I signpost people to other services. So a physical health check is mainly looking at height and weight. So we'll talk about body mass index, we do blood pressure and heart rate. So I bring a small blood pressure machine with me, and I've got some body composition scales. So people would need to take their shoes and socks off and stand on the little metal pads, and it gives a little bit more information about their body composition. So we look at their percentage of fat, body fat, visceral fat, and also muscle. So it's quite a lot of information for people. But if staff don't want that, there are some staff who say, oh no, I don't want to get on the scales. That's absolutely fine. I'm absolutely delighted to see them. They don't have to have their blood pressure done if that's not what they want on the day that they come. So that's fine. And when we're talking about lifestyle, a lot of the conversation is about exercise. So as well as burning off fat or improving their muscles, there's a fantastic mental health well-being from exercise. So we talk about that and what resources might be available. Also talk about smoking, alcohol, the conversation going all different directions. So when I'm signposting people, I'm not trying to sell anything. Everything that I talk about is free, so I'm not promoting the local gym or anything like that. And we talk about what exercise resources are available. Might be talking about nutrition or sleep. James, you mentioned the menopause. That comes up quite a lot, and I've given people menopause advice, where to get good advice, or where there's free seminars, that kind of stuff. Again, you also mentioned financial well-being, and that's come up time and time again with staff. And the Healthier Together support network recently had a webinar about financial well-being, so we can signpost people to that. Sometimes people are ready to quit smoking. That's happened a few times, and that's really exciting. So I can point people in the right direction so they can achieve that if that's one of their goals. And the Healthier Together support network has got a lot of resources, so a lot of common themes that people might be interested in, such as low mood or moral distress. So I can point them into the direction of their training courses, and also weight management programs. There's a couple of free weight management programs that are 12 weeks long to support staff, so I can point people to those, which is really good. Everything is confidential, so I don't write to a manager, I don't write to someone's doctor. But when I say things are confidential, obviously I'm a registered nurse, so if someone discloses something that's a safeguarding issue, then just the same as you, if something like that happens, then we'd obviously have to do something about it, and I'd have to look into it. So the workplace wellbeing checks are not a counselling session. I'm not a counsellor, and it's not a way to fast track to get a GP appointment or a consultant appointment. There's been a couple of people who felt that was what the session was about, and that's really not what happens in our 30-minute session. It may be that I do ask somebody to go and see their GP. For example, I've had a couple of people with high blood pressure, and that would be something we would ask them to go and see their GP to have a discussion. And so the results are given in a paper format like this. I don't know if you can see that. So they get a little booklet with all their results inside. They get that to take away after their health check. They'd also get an email, so I email people with resources that we've talked about. So there might be some attachments, but there also might be some web links, for example, how to get onto the no smoking resources, or how to access the weight management program. So they'd also get an email. They would be sent an evaluation form. So if you buy a cup of tea these days, costs to write to you and tell you how to have a cup of tea. So I think people are very familiar with filling in evaluation forms. It helps us shape our service, helps us work out where we're going with the project, which is always useful. And I've written down a couple of things that staff have said, actually, just to give some indication. So somebody said, I'm going to read this. Thank you for offering this. I'm now on a programme to get fitter and lose weight. I'm so glad I took the opportunity to have the health check. It's motivated me to regularly exercise and eat more healthy meals. So that's great feedback. I'm really pleased with that. If someone's interested, if you would like me to come to your workplace and meet with your staff, how do you do that? We'll just get in touch and send me an email. My email will be at the end. Karen will circulate that. And I've got appointments from January 2023 onwards. We would arrange a venue between us. So sometimes it's one of the rooms in the care homes, or if it's an office setting, I'll come to the office. It just needs to be quiet. We don't want any interruptions. And I'm fairly flexible on the day of the week or the timing. So if the morning's better, or if you need me to come in the evening, that's fine too. We just need 2 chairs, 1 each. And once we've got a date, I send you a booking form, and we allocate the slots to staff. And I'm pretty flexible. I know that on the day things happen, sometimes people aren't going to be in work, or there's another situation has arisen, so staff get reallocated, and that's absolutely fine. We're pretty flexible, so that's not a problem. Sometimes people have asked, how many times can I come? And it depends how many people in your workforce are interested. I can come several times if that fits in with what your workforce need. So yeah, it's pretty flexible service. And we've got a little video to show. I'm not sure if you're showing it, Karen, is that right? We had a few problems with the video earlier. It's got a very catchy theme tune, and it wasn't working earlier. It was just showing a slide, so hopefully it might work this time.
I haven't got it, Kate, so
oh, sorry, I thought Tamsin had sent it to you. I will try and send it myself. Here we go. Let's do some screen sharing.
Okay, we can see that.
Hi, I'm not sure if you had the music to that or just the slides.
Well, I personally just have the slides, but I don't know if anybody else had the music, but we certainly got the message. So that
Okay, lovely. Does anyone have any questions?
there's nothing in the chat at the moment.
Okay.
Where it's really useful service, and basically, I know people might steer away from it, thinking that you might find out something, but as you quite rightly say, is confidential. So, and it's just giving people the heads up, isn't it? And a little bit of
Absolutely, yeah. It's fantastic. We've had some really great feedback from staff. I think staff feel very valued if their employers have done this. They've been, really surprised. The conversation can go in lots of different directions, and if there's things that they don't want, we can just dip in and out. Yeah, it's been fantastic, really fantastic. When we've met staff, they've really appreciated it and got really engaged in it. I mean, it's understandable sometimes people are a little bit apprehensive, but hopefully we can reassure them when they turn up.
Well, as both James and Flora highlighted, sort of leading the staff in looking after the well-being is crucial to retention. So, how are we going to? Is Alicia going to, or Tamsin going to join us now?
I'm happy to jump in.
All right. Okay. So over to you then, Alicia. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I hope you can see me. Oh, good. So I'm Alicia. I'm new in a role, which is the adult workforce wellbeing and support lead for social care. So I'm looking to support care homes, domiciliary care agencies, and also some unregulated services in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. If I quickly just screen share a little overview with you. Can you see that? Is that coming up on? No.
I can share it for you if you.
Oh, there you go. Hopefully that's coming up now.
Yeah. Nope, that's me.
Right, that should be coming up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yes, we can.
So just a little overview. So like I said, it is a new role. So hopefully many care providers will have received an introduction email from myself on the 8th of September. And it also had a link to a survey. So part of my role is to find out what current facilities, care homes and providers are using to support their work staff for health and wellbeing, and also to introduce some of the resources currently available. And obviously Cate's here herself to introduce her workforce health checks, but there are other resources available currently at the moment. One of them is a React training course, which is being run by March on Stress, and that's a 90-minute online session for any team leaders, supervisors, to be able to get them confident in having conversations with staff, to sort of recognise signs that staff may be having problems, to engage with them, how to sort of actively listen, check that the risk, prioritise help for them, and talk about specific actions that are needed. I've sent out links for dates. This training is available from the 1st of November to the 15th of December. And also there's a train the trainer session, which is a 2.5-hour session, which goes further into detail and also enables trainers within organisations to cascade this training down to managers and team leaders within the organisations. The other method, which I think Cate did quickly touch on, is also a key active resource, which is a 12-week health programme for social care staff. So it's something they can do through in their own time, and it is a program which is a device which helps monitor their activity, and it has 6 mentoring sessions to help them engage with sort of more active lifestyles, which, as we know, then can help with physical and mental well-being. And then we've got Tamsin with us today, who is going to talk more about the Healthy Together Sport Network, who I'm working with. But like I say, I will put in the chat my link to the survey, because if I can get feedback from providers, that'd be brilliant to help me how to utilise this role to support you all.
Tamsin's already put the link in.
Oh,
And
thank you, Tamsin.
So there's 2 links that for people to take away will be useful. So yes, okay, thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks, Alicia. It's worth saying as well that all of this training is paid for upfront, so it's free for you and your teams. So the React Mental Health training is funded by March on Stress, so they're providing the training. We've already funded it. We just need people to attend this training. Obviously, the health checks again is free, and the Cate Active is also free. So please do get people signed up. They're for a limited amount of time. The Cate Active React Mental Health needs to be used by December, the end of December. So please do get people booked on. Alicia, have you shared how to book onto those?
Yeah, I can put that on there again, but I've got the, if I send out links as well, I can go through the React trainings either to myself or to the admin for the Healthy Together Support Network.
Super, thanks very much. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Kate. So there are some fantastic resources that are provided and all free for social care. So one of the things I wanted to just ask was, are you all completely familiar with the Healthier Together Support Network? Is anybody, how many people have heard of it and understand it?
I'm going to put my hand up because I have, obviously.
So
Don't know.
I'm happy to do a quick run through of the latest offers. So just sharing the screen. Is that sharing a screen? Can you see the website?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
Rachel said that would be very, very helpful. No. Not coming through.
Okay. Karen, are you able to just load the Healthier Together Support Network website, and I'm happy to just talk through it. Doesn't seem to want to share.
Let me just, you should be able to, your co-host. It's not. Alicia's just put up the reactive information. So what do you want me to go onto the Healthier Together
Support
website?
Network. If you type that into Google, it should come up straight away on the top.
Okay.
I had to come in a bizarre way into Zoom. It was trying to do a million updates.
Whilst I'm just doing this, we'll basically it's a really good service, and as Tamsin has said, it's free. Healthier Together, is that the one?
Healthier Together Support Network. I just put the link.
Bristol website.
Just put a link into the chat box.
There we go. Okay. Let me come back and let me. Gosh, technology. Where would we have been? There we go. Okay. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yes. Super. Thank you.
All right.
So the Healthier Together Support Network is confidential wellbeing and mental health support for all health and care staff across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, and that includes all social care. So that's your healthcare assistants, your managers, your cooks, your domestics. If you work in health and care, we will support you. And what we offer is a full psychology assessment. So you can fill in the form online, and then you can get access to one-to-one psychology support. It's a fantastic offer. It's completely free. Once you've had that assessment with your psychologist, they will either, if they decide it's trauma, you can have up to 12 sessions. For all other support, it's up to 6. And we can also refer to counselling sessions and signpost to other areas as well, depending on the need. It's a completely free service. And the feedback for it has been absolutely fantastic. We've got some star stories there at the bottom. It's funded by NHS England, but open to all of social care. So there's some staff stories about people and their experiences working through COVID. So these are all my previous colleagues, but I've called in favours for to create these videos. So if we go up a little bit on the screen, please. And if you click on support available, thank you. So if you scroll down a little bit, so there's some support options here on the flow chart. So when you access the service, you can obviously refer yourself for assessment. It's very straightforward. You just fill in a form online and our admin team will call you. And then they'll talk to you and offer you some available slots. So you can speak to a psychologist either face-to-face, which is based in Whitefriars, by telephone or online. It's completely your preference of what you'd like, and we can book a session with a psychologist for you. They can help you develop a personal action plan. They can offer you psychology support, assessment, consultation, referral for therapy, alternative services. We offer free webinars, psychology skills training, compassionate leadership training. We've got wellbeing explainers on the website and online self-help guides. If we go down a little bit more. We've also got a new trauma support service, and that's managers. So if someone in your team has experienced a traumatic event, you can call us and we can arrange for a psychologist to come and speak to your team. That referral does need to come from a manager, and then they'll contact you within 1 working day to offer support for that. Scroll down a bit more. We've got a fear of needles support, and that's on the back of the COVID vaccine. Obviously in the autumn it's coming up to the boosters for the COVID vaccine, so if you have any staff who have fear of needles, we can help support that as well. Again, you can just fill in the online referral form or phone us. Our telephone number's there. We've got some wellbeing explainers, so you don't have to click on them, Karen, but if you do click on them, there's 2 free webinars there looking at navigating conflicting pressures at home and work, which I think is something we've all struggled with at some point or another, and another webinar looking at moral distress. Now, moral distress is where you want to provide an amazing service, but there are external factors outside of your control, potentially such as staffing pressures, where you can't necessarily provide the service you'd like, and that can cause moral distress. We can offer psychology assessment and consultation, which I talked about, where the psychologist will talk to you, assess you, and decide which is the best option for you. If you scroll down a bit more. We also have support for Ukrainian refugees, which there are some helpful links in there should you need that. Understand a little bit more. We also offer help for teams. So if your team is struggling, perhaps there might be bullying within the team, you might have had a traumatic event, there might be team members that are struggling, it might be just post-COVID, people are struggling to pull themselves back from that. It's been an incredible stressful time. So you can book a consultation with a psychologist and arrange some support that way. We also work with NALARI, which is a Black Asian ethnic minority community-based group. They offer counselling support for the BAME community. So if people don't want to access us, we also work with NALARI for extra support. We also work with Relate. So if you have relationship difficulties, you can access Relate. Say you're accessing via the Healthier Together support network, and you can have some free sessions with them as well. And we also work with Employ, which is access to work mental health support as well. And there's our confidentiality statement at the bottom. If we go back up to the top. So we are a completely confidential service. Again, we don't tell your manager, we don't tell anybody that you've come to see us. And we also have a separate database where we put all your systems, so we don't link it to your NHS number or your hospital number. You have a separate number on a separate database that's confidential to us. So you can't have any colleagues that will pop in and have a look, not that they should anyway, but just that extra layer of confidentiality. So if we click on training and workshops, please. So we have a range of training workshops. We've got a couple of new podcasts that have just gone up that you can download. So one on safe place and caring for ourselves. We are holding a face-to-face conference, which is brave in these times, in October. That's already fully booked. That's at Engineers House, and we have a cancellation list for that. And then we also offer wellbeing workshops, workshop wellbeing, which are interactive workshops you can book onto. Caring for ourselves to care for others. That's a set of 4 sessions that you need to attend, and that's on the basis that you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're struggling yourselves, you're going to find it difficult to support your teams. And there's some sessions to help support you to make you a better leader and a better manager. Some webinars on traumatic events at work and effective ways to respond and cope. We've just held that last week, so there will be another date coming up very soon for that one. That was very popular. Connecting with nature for well-being. It's recognised that nature is really important to our mental health. So we have a psychologist that specialises in that. It's holding the nature event in October. Winter pressures, we're holding on the 19th of October. It's the season we're coming into very soon. Obviously on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are huge winter pressure challenges. It's about identifying, recognising those, identifying early warning signs of stress, low mood and worry, introducing some self-care and some team care ideas for managing winter stresses, and signposting where you can access additional support and psychology support should you need it. As I said, teams quite often struggle, so we offer facilitated meetings where a psychologist will come to your team and help support your team with any experiences that may be negatives, any stresses they may have, introducing wellbeing at a team level, and looking at any psychological challenges that your team may be facing. There's some really nice feedback there. Introduction to Compassionate Leadership is one of our most popular courses. We have the highest number of people coming through for this one, and that's a set of 3 workshops looking at creating healthy teams, creating compassionate teams, and psychologically safe teams. A lot of those sessions are fully booked, as you can see, but we've just put some new dates on at the bottom, so please book in quick for those. They're coming up next year in January and March. And then workshop trauma awareness training, which is for managers and leads within social care. And that's a 2-hour session covering, sorry, if you just scroll back up a little bit. So covering what is workplace trauma, common responses to traumatic events, and supporting each other after a traumatic or difficult event. So if you want to book on any of these, if you just scroll down a little bit more, there's a very simple booking form. So you fill this in online via the website, and I've put the link in the chat box, and then we'll just send you a link to attend the training. It's very straightforward. All of this training is free. We don't charge anything. It's already funded, so please do use it and do book on. So if we go back up to the top of the page, please. If you go on to how to book, on the top right-hand tab, if you click, sorry, top right-hand tab on the very top of the page is a tab. We're saying how to book.
This one here?
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And if you want to book a psychology assessment, you can self-refer yourself. We don't take any referrals from managers. It has to be the person, for consent purposes, referring themselves. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there is a form here. Again, you just fill in that form online. When a member of our admin team will call you and book you in for a session, either face-to-face, by phone, or on a video call. So if we go back up to the top, please. Gonna get dizzy all this backwards and forwards. Top right hand side, there's a Get Help Now button in blue underneath the wheelchair picture.
Where to?
The blue box. There. So we're not a crisis service. It's important to remember that. When we're not 24 hours, we work office hours. So outside of those hours, you can access Care First. We funded some sessions with those. So if a member of your team wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning, feels they really need support and they don't want to wait until the working day morning, they can access Care First, who will support them and hold them until we're back open. And there's the details there to access Care First. If somebody is in crisis, they can phone 999, 111. If it's outside of office hours, they can phone that. Speak to the GP. There's also a link for adult mental health crisis support if somebody is in crisis. Obviously, we have links for the Samaritans. There's practitioner health. There's Shout, which is a text app if someone doesn't want to talk. We've got the Staying Alive app, which is suicide prevention. Campaign Against Living Miserably, so Calm. If someone's under 35, they might want to access Papyrus. Silence of Suicide for Everyone. And there's a list of alternative talking therapies if you want to look at something external to what we offer, depending on the area you work in within BNSSG. There are lists there as well. So if you go back up to the top, please. Doing a grand job, thank you, Karen. And then if you click on the long COVID tab.
On the where, sorry?
Long COVID tab.
Okay.
That's it, yeah. So we also offer long COVID service. So many people have been impacted by COVID and are still struggling. Some people are still off work. Some people are struggling inside of work. So we want to support all of those people. So this is a series of 10 interactive peer-to-peer support sessions with a fully trained senior psychologist and a physiotherapist. So if someone's struggling, how to access it, there's a long COVID single point of access link. So you click on that. Please don't now, Karen, it's all right. So if you do click on that, you do need to be assessed and have a formal diagnosis of long COVID. And that's just to make sure you don't have an underlying condition such as pulmonary embolism or something, and we're treating you for long COVID. So you have to have a formal diagnosis and have been screened for everything else. And then once you have that diagnosis, you can scroll down to the bottom, and then you have to click yes that you've been assessed by the long COVID clinic. You can click yes on there. Thank you. And then yes, you have a diagnosis of long COVID. And then yes, you've completed your medical investigations. You don't need to submit it, Karen. Thank you. But that just takes you down to a referral form. Again, you fill that in and our admin team will contact you, and you'll have support for long COVID with, as I say, a senior psychologist, a fully trained senior physiotherapist, and peer-to-peer support. We get really good feedback for that session as well. So it is a fantastic offer that we have. That's a very brief whistle-stop tour. There is also an option if you book somebody or somebody books themselves in for a session, you can meet our team on the homepage and you can see a little bio of the psychologist that you'll be seeing as well, which is fantastic. Does anybody have any questions? There's also on there useful information. There's a blog and some useful bits. So if you click down on that one, you can have a look. I'm going over time now, but you can have a look at that on the website. And there's lots of tips on stress, anxiety, loneliness, moral distress, some useful tabs on there as well. Does anybody have any questions for my whistle-stop tour of our service?
Okay, I'll stop sharing this now.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for that. That's brilliant.
That's all right. All right, James has had to go. There's no questions at the moment in the chat, but clearly emphasis this morning is on staff wellbeing. So the message is, if you've got healthy staff and you look after your staff, then you should be able to keep them recruited with you. So I certainly would sort of advocate anybody using the service. And it's as Tamsin has said, it's free, it's there, it's a fantastic service. It's not going to be there forever, I don't think, is it, Tamsin? It's
use it or lose it service. So if people aren't using it, we'll lose it. So please do access the service. It's free, it's there for you. We are trying to encourage social care teams. Currently only make up 9% of our referrals, and social care is massive across BNSSG. So either all of social care is very happy with no stresses or worries, or people aren't accessing the service when perhaps they could. So please do access the service.
I think it's well. And Rachel has said, Tamsin, is it possible to have your email address, please?
Of course.
For the purpose of recording, anybody who would like any contacts from presenters this morning, I can let you have the details. James and Flora are commercial partners of Care and Support West, and we have contact details with them. So if anybody would like, and Tamsin's put her email address on the chat. Thank you, Tamsin. That's great. So if nobody's got any more, Rachel said thank you. If nobody's got any questions, it leaves me to say thank you so much to all of our presenters. I think it's so useful to just be reminded and to know what is actually out there. Clearly, I mean, Flora talked about the stress bucket, James has talked about the high performance of the workplace and bringing your staff together with you. And well, the three ladies, Tamsin, Alethea and Cate, you do a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful job, and you deserve praise. So everybody, thank you so much for this morning. I'm going to stop recording now. Grant has said thank you, it's really valuable. Stop